The alarm screamed through every corridor of the research station. Red lights flashed against metal walls, turning everything into a nightmare of shadows and blood-colored warnings. Park Ji-woo dropped the datapad she was holding and felt her stomach turn to ice. That particular alarm meant only one thing. The containment cells were open. She stood in the biology lab on the 3rd level of Sector 7, surrounded by screens showing data about creatures from across the galaxy. For 3 years, Ji-woo had studied these animals through reinforced glass, learning their behaviors, their sounds, their moods. She knew which ones were naturally aggressive and which ones were just scared. She knew their feeding patterns and sleeping habits, but she had never been in the same room as any of them, without 6 inches of specialized glass between them. Now something was wrong with the power. The lights flickered. Her computer screen went dark, then bright, then dark again. Through the window of the lab, she could see other researchers running down the hallway, their faces tight with fear. Dr. Kim Hyun-sik burst through the door. He was older than Ji-woo, maybe 50, with gray in his hair and permanent worry lines around his eyes. He had been studying alien animals for 20 years, longer than Ji-woo had been doing this work. "We need to move," he said, his voice shaking. "They're evacuating the sector." Luff tented. What got out?" Ji-woo asked, though part of her already knew. There were protocols for small escapes, quiet alerts for when a bird-sized creature got loose. This alarm, the one that made your bones vibrate with its urgency, was reserved for the worst scenarios. "Everything in the lower cells," Hyun-sik said. He pulled up a security feed on his pad, and Ji-woo saw the empty cages, at least 20 of them, doors hanging open like hungry mouths. The solar flare hit the power grid. Backup systems are trying to compensate, but the electromagnetic pulse fried half the lock circuits. Lee Da-eun, one of the maintenance workers, ran into the lab behind him. She was young, maybe 25, and her hands were shaking as she tried to close the door behind her. "The emergency bulkheads are coming down," she said. "We have maybe 2 minutes to get to the evacuation corridor, or we're trapped in here." They ran. Ji-woo grabbed her emergency kit from under the desk without thinking, just training taking over. They made it halfway down the corridor before they heard the first scream. It cut off very quickly. Hyun-sik stopped running. His face went pale. "That was from the junction corridor. That's our way out." "There's a backup route through the cargo section," Da-eun said, but her voice didn't sound hopeful. "It's longer. We might not make it before the bulkheads seal." They didn't make it. The massive metal doors came down with a grinding sound that Ji-woo felt in her teeth. They were trapped on the wrong side, stuck in Sector 7, with whatever had gotten out of those cells. The 3 of them made it back to the biology lab and locked the door. It wouldn't hold against anything really determined, but it was better than nothing. Through the window, they could see into the corridor and down toward the junction where the scream had come from. "Can you see anything?" Da-eun asked, crouching below the window line. Hyun-sik had pulled up the security feeds again. His face looked gray in the light from his datapad. "It's a render," he said quietly. "A Vraxian render." Ji-woo felt something cold settle in her chest. She had studied the render for 2 years. It was the reason she had been assigned to this station in the first place. The Coalition wanted someone to figure out if the species could ever be safely handled without sedation. So far, her research had basically concluded, no, probably not. The render was built for killing. It stood 12 feet tall on 6 legs, each one ending in claws that could punch through ship armor. It had 6 eyes arranged around its head, giving it almost complete circular vision. Its homeworld was a nightmare place where everything was trying to eat everything else, and the render had evolved to be the thing that won those fights. "How many people are trapped on this side?" Ji-woo asked. Hyun-sik checked his pad. 47, scattered across the sector in different labs and storage rooms. "And the render? Hunting." Hyun-sik turned the pad so she could see. The security footage showed the creature moving through the corridors, not running, just walking, with terrible purpose. Every few minutes, it would stop, tilt its massive head, and listen. Then, it would choose a direction, and continue. They watched it find a supply closet where 3 people were hiding. They watched what happened next. Jiwoo turned away, feeling sick. "Command is going to vent the sector," Hyun-sik said. His voice was flat, emotionless, like he was reading a weather report. "They'll evacuate everyone they can reach, and then open the external airlocks. Everything gets sucked into space. It's the only way to be sure." "There are 47 people in here," Daum said. "I know. Can't they send in security teams?" Jiwoo asked. Hyun-sik shook his head. The first response team already tried. 8 soldiers with military-grade weapons and armor. The render killed them all. In less than a minute. It's too fast, too armored, too smart. Normal tactics don't work. They sat in silence for a while, listening to the render's roars echoing through the ventilation system. It was getting closer. Jiwoo could track its progress just by the sound. It was learning the station layout, testing doors, figuring out where people might hide. 10 minutes, Hyun-sik said. Maybe less. That's how long before it reaches this section. Jiwoo moved to the observation window and looked out into the corridor. She could see down the hallway toward the junction. Movement caught her eye. The render appeared at the far end, maybe 60 feet away. Even at this distance, it was terrifying. Its scales were dark, gray, almost black, and they seemed to absorb the emergency lighting. Its claws clicked against the metal floor with each step, but Jiwoo forced herself to watch it. Really, watch it. The way she had been trained to observe animals. And she saw something that surprised her. The render wasn't calm. Its ears, small triangular structures near the top of its head, were pinned flat against its skull. Its secondary eyes, the smaller ones used for detecting heat, were moving constantly, scanning every direction. Its tail lashed back and forth, smacking against the walls. "It's terrified," Jiwoo said. "What?" Hyun-sik looked up from his pad. "Look at its body language. The ear position, the tail movement, the way it's holding its neck low and tight. It's not hunting for fun. It's scared. It's killing people," Daeun said. "Because it's scared," Jiwoo repeated. "Think about it. It woke up in a strange place. No idea where it is or how it got here. Everything here has hurt it before. We've sedated it, studied it, kept it in a cage. Every person it sees is a potential threat. It's killing them before they can hurt it first." Hyun-sik stared at her. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying it's not a monster. It's a frightened animal." Jiwoo took a breath. "And I think I can calm it down." "That's insane," Hyun-sik said. "Probably," Jiwoo agreed. She was already moving toward the door, checking her emergency kit for anything useful. Food pellets, a water container, a basic medical kit, nothing that would help with a 12-foot murder machine. But maybe she wouldn't need equipment. "Jiwoo, you can't." Daeun grabbed her arm. "It will kill you. If I don't try, we all die anyway when they vent the sector." Jiwoo looked at both of them. "I've spent 3 years studying this creature. I know how it moves, how it communicates, what scares it, and what calms it. This is literally what I'm trained for." "You're trained to observe them through glass," Hyun-sik said. "Then I guess we're about to find out if training translates to practice." Jiwoo opened the door before she could think too hard about what she was doing. The corridor was quiet now. The render had stopped moving. Probably listening. She could feel its attention, the way you can feel when something dangerous is watching you. She stepped out into the hallway. Behind her, she heard Hyun-sik whisper something that might have been a prayer, or might have been a curse. The render appeared around the corner. Its 6 eyes locked onto her. Every muscle in its body tensed, preparing to charge. Jiwoo stood still and tried to remember how to breathe. The distance between Jiwoo and the render was maybe 15 feet. Close enough that she could smell it. A sharp, metallic scent mixed with something organic and alien. close enough that she could see the individual scales on its massive legs, each one edged with what looked like crystal that caught the emergency lights. Her heart was beating so hard she thought it might break her ribs. Every instinct in her body screamed at her to run, to get back behind the door, to hide. She ignored those instincts. Running would trigger the chase response. Hiding would make her look like prey. Instead, she turned her body sideways. Not facing away, that would be disrespectful, like ignoring a threat, but not facing directly toward it either, which would be a challenge. Sideways was neutral. Sideways said she wasn't here to fight. The render took a step closer. Its claws scraped against the metal floor, leaving grooves in the reinforced plating. Those same claws had torn through military armor. Like paper. Jiwoo tried not to think about that. She kept her eyes on the creature but didn't stare directly into its face. Direct eye contact meant aggression in most predator species. Instead, she watched its body, reading the signals. The ears were still pinned back. The secondary eyes were moving fast, looking for additional threats. The tail was rigid, held low, still scared, still defensive. Jiwoo started making a soft clicking sound with her tongue against the roof of her mouth. It was a sound she had heard in the old research videos from the render's homeworld, before the coalition had captured the last surviving specimens. Mother renders made that sound to their young, a comfort noise that meant safety. The render's head tilted. One of its ears twitched forward. Just slightly. Confusion. Maybe. Or recognition. Behind her, through the still-open lab door, she heard Hyun-sik's voice very quietly over her earpiece. Jiwoo, the bridge, is watching this on the security feed. Half the command staff is there. They're about 2 seconds from venting the sector. She couldn't answer without making noise, so she just kept clicking softly, kept her body sideways and loose. On the bridge of the station, Commander Thelvan stood with his hand over the emergency vent control. He was Viridian, tall and blue-skinned with 4 arms and eyes that could see into the infrared spectrum. He had commanded this station for 7 years and had never lost anyone to a containment breach. Today, he was going to lose 47 people unless he made a decision. His tactical officer was pulling up the sector diagram, highlighting the areas they could still evacuate. His communications officer, Lieutenant Choi Bo-ram, was one of the few other humans on the station. She was staring at the screen showing Jiwoo and the render. "What is she doing?" Thelvan asked. "Speaking its language," Bo-ram said quietly. Thelvan looked at the screen again. The human wasn't speaking. She was just standing there, making soft noises, barely moving. The render had stopped advancing, but it was still clearly agitated, still dangerous. "I don't understand." "Communication isn't always words," Bo-ram said. "She's using body language, posture, sounds. She's telling it she's not a threat. It killed 8 armed soldiers. Because they were threats. She's showing it that she's different." Thelvan wanted to understand. His species had animals on their homeworld, of course. They had domesticated some for food and labor. But it was simple, transactional. You fed them, they worked. You needed them, you took them. There was no communication involved beyond basic commands. This was something else entirely. In the corridor, Jiwoo took one small step backward, not fleeing, just creating space, giving the render room to breathe, showing it that she wasn't trying to trap it or corner it. The render didn't charge. It watched her with those 6 eyes, its head swaying slightly as it processed this strange situation. Jiwoo very slowly lowered herself into a crouch. She kept her movements smooth and deliberate, telegraphing every motion so the render could see she wasn't attacking. When she was down at a lower level, smaller, less threatening, she stopped and waited. 5 minutes passed. To Jiwoo, it felt like 5 hours. Her legs started to cramp from holding the crouch position. Sweat ran down her back despite the station's climate control. But she didn't move. She just kept making that soft clicking sound. Kept her breathing slow and visible. Kept showing the render that she was calm. The render took a step forward. Then another. It was close enough now that Ji-woo could have reached out and touched its front leg if she wanted to. She very much did not want to. Its head lowered, bringing its face down to her level. The main eyes, large and dark, studied her. She could see her own reflection in them. Small and vulnerable. The render's ears shifted, still not relaxed, but not pinned back anymore. Curious forward, Ji-woo thought. It was trying to figure her out. She had one chance to get this right. One move that would either work or get her killed. Ji-woo slowly extended her right hand. Palm up, fingers relaxed. It was a gesture of offering, of openness. She had no food in her hand. Nothing to give, except the gesture itself. But it was a universal signal that dozens of species seemed to understand on some level. Open hand meant no weapon, no threat, no hidden danger. The render stared at her hand for a long moment. Then, it leaned forward and sniffed her palm with its secondary nostrils, the ones that could detect heat and chemical signatures. Ji-woo held her breath. This was the moment. The render was close enough to bite her hand off, close enough to kill her with one swipe. Instead, it huffed out a breath that stirred her hair and smelled like copper and stone. Easy, Ji-woo whispered. It was barely a sound, just a breath with shape. Easy, friend. The render's 6 legs folded beneath it. It settled onto the deck, plating with a heavy thud that Ji-woo felt through the floor. Its massive head lowered until it was at her eye level, no longer looming above her. Still capable of killing her in a heartbeat. Still dangerous, but calm. On the bridge, the entire command staff stood in shocked silence. Thelvan's hand slowly lifted away from the emergency vent control. Did that just happen? Someone whispered. Boram was smiling, though tears were running down her face. That's us, she said. That's what humans do. Alarms were still screaming throughout the station, but they seemed distant now. Ji-woo stayed in her crouch, her hand still extended, and the render stayed settled on the floor. They remained like that for several minutes, just being calm together, just sharing space. Finally, Ji-woo spoke softly into her earpiece. Hyun-sik, what else got out? There was a pause while he checked. 17 other specimens. Various species. Most are contained to Sector 7, but 3 got into the ventilation system. I need you to pull up everything we have on their behavior patterns. Social structures, fear responses, comfort signals. She paused. We're going to need to calm them down too. Ji-woo, what you just did was impossible. You can't expect to do it again. I don't expect anything. But we have to try. How much time before the emergency vent? Thelvan's voice came over the channel. He must have patched into her frequency. The vent order is suspended. For now. But we have 47 people trapped in that sector, and 17 dangerous creatures loose. I need solutions. I have one solution, Ji-woo said. Get me every human on this station who has experience with animals. Anyone who grew up on a farm, worked in a zoo, trained dogs, anything. We're going to do this the human way. The human way? Thelvan sounded skeptical. We're going to talk to them. Slowly, carefully, Ji-woo stood up. The render watched her, but didn't move. She took one step backward, then another. The render's ears twitched, but it stayed settled on the floor. Stay, Ji-woo said softly. Good. Stay there. She backed up toward the lab door, never turning away from the render, never breaking eye contact. When she reached the doorway, she finally slipped inside. Hyun-sik and Da-eun grabbed her, their faces pale. That was the bravest or stupidest thing I've ever seen, Hyun-sik said. Probably both, Ji-woo admitted. Her legs were shaking now that the adrenaline was fading. She sat down hard on the floor. But it worked. And we need to make it work 16 more times. Her earpiece crackled. This is Nam Soo-jin from Cargo Handling. I heard the call for humans with animal experience. I grew up on a ranch back on Earth. I'm in Sector 4, but I can get to you. Another voice. Kang Min-ho, shuttle pilot. I trained police dogs for 5 years before I joined the coalition. I'm on my way. 2. More voices joined, one by one. Humans scattered across the station, responding to the call. There were only 12 of them total, on a station of 3,000 crew members. But now, all 12 were volunteering. Thelvan's voice cut through the chatter. I don't understand what you people are planning. But you have 2 hours before High Command orders me to purge the sector, regardless. Make it count. Ji-woo looked through the window at the render, still sitting calmly in the corridor. 2 hours. 17 creatures. 12 humans. Impossible odds, Hyun-sik said. Good thing we're human then, Ji-woo replied. We specialize in impossible. Nam Soo-jin arrived first, climbing through a maintenance shaft that connected Sector 4 to Sector 7. She dropped down into the corridor and immediately froze when she saw the render sitting outside the biology lab like an enormous, deadly guard dog. That's the friendliest murder machine I've ever seen, she said over the comm channel. Ji-woo came to the door. It's calm now. But don't make any sudden moves. And don't stare at it directly. Soo-jin nodded and kept her eyes down as she approached. She was short and stocky with dirt under her fingernails from years of working with cargo and machinery. But before she came to space, she had spent 20 years on her family's ranch, raising livestock and managing working animals. She knew how to read body language, how to project calm when you were actually terrified. Kang Min-ho arrived next, squeezing through the same maintenance shaft. He was thin and wiry, with nervous energy that he seemed to keep carefully controlled. As a shuttle pilot, he needed steady hands and a calm mind. As a former dog trainer, he understood patience and repetition. Others came in ones and twos. Yoon Jae-sung, the gruff engineer who insisted he didn't like animals, but kept photos of his childhood cat on his personal data pad. Park Sang-woo, a medic who had worked in a wildlife rescue center before joining the coalition. Lee Eun-ji, a botanist who had studied animal pollination patterns and understood cross-species communication better than most. 12 humans total, gathered in a corridor with a render that could kill them all without effort. Ji-woo briefed them quickly, while Hyun-sik pulled up data on the other escaped creatures. We have 17 other specimens loose in the sector, Ji-woo said. Each one is dangerous. Each one is scared. Our job is to calm them down before Command decides to vent the sector and kill everyone, including us. How much time? Min-ho asked. Less than 2 hours now. Someone swore quietly. We split up, Ji-woo continued. Each team takes a different creature. We use everything we know about animal behavior. Read their body language. Speak their language. Show them we're not threats. And most importantly, be patient. Rushing will get us killed. Soo-jin raised her hand. What about the people who are still trapped in other parts of the sector? We calm the creatures first. Once they're settled, we can evacuate safely. Ji-woo looked at each of them. I know this sounds insane, but it's the only chance we have. Everyone else tried weapons and force? We're going to try understanding. They divided up the creatures based on what they knew about each species and what each human knew about animals in general. Soo-jin took the Keltorian spike wolves, pack predators that had cornered a group of researchers in a storage bay. Min-ho went after the Etherian razorbirds that were loose in the cargo section. Jae-sung, despite his protests, was sent to deal with something called a Morthian creeper, a ambush predator that was hiding somewhere in the ventilation system. Ji-woo kept the render with her and headed for the next closest threat, a group of 3 Valkyrian hunters that had trapped 5 people in a dead-end corridor. She walked through the station with the render following her like a massive shadow. Every step sent vibrations through the deck plating. Its claws clicked against the metal floor. But it followed her, calm and patient, almost gentle in the way it moved. When they reached the corridor where the Valkyrian hunters had people cornered, Jiwoo stopped and assessed the situation. The hunters were about 6 feet tall, covered in thick fur, with 4 arms and wide jaws full of grinding teeth. They were herbivores on their homeworld, but extremely territorial. Right now, they were pacing back and forth in front of the door where the researchers had barricaded themselves, making low, growling sounds that meant aggression. Jiwoo clicked her tongue, and the render moved up beside her. The hunters noticed them immediately. They turned, saw the render, and their body language changed instantly. Ears back, heads down, growling stopped. The render was an apex predator. The hunters were not. That social hierarchy existed across species. The hunters backed away from the door slowly, giving ground without turning their backs. Jiwoo walked forward calmly, the render beside her, and the hunters moved further down the corridor. When they reached an intersection, the hunters turned and ran, disappearing into another section of the station. Render is like having a universal permission slip. Wish I had one. These spike wolves are not impressed by me. What are you trying? Jiwoo asked, while she helped the rescued researchers evacuate toward a safe zone. Everything. I've been sitting in front of them for 10 minutes. They just growl at me. Stop trying to engage them. Turn sideways and ignore them. Act like they're beneath your notice. There was a pause. That seems counterproductive. Pack predators respect confidence. If you act scared, they smell it. If you act like you're the alpha, and they're nothing special, they get curious. Another pause. Then Sujin laughed. It's working. One of them just sat down. Reward it. Toss it food. Not directly at it. Just near it. Let it make the choice to take the food. In the cargo bay, Sujin pulled a protein bar from her pocket and tossed it to the side. The spike wolf watched her, then slowly walked over and picked up the bar. It ate while watching her. Now wait, Jiwoo said. Wait until another one sits. Then reward that one too. You're creating a pattern. Sitting equals food. Food equals safety. It took another 15 minutes, but eventually all 3 spike wolves were sitting in a rough semicircle around Sujin, waiting for the next treat. Their tails were still twitching nervously, but they weren't growling anymore. Minho had a different problem. The razorbirds were a flock species, small but deadly. Each one was about the size of a chicken, but with beaks that could strip flesh from bone in seconds. They flew in coordinated attacks that overwhelmed larger predators. Right now, they were circling the cargo bay ceiling, shrieking at each other and at him. I can't get them to land, Minho said over the comm. They just keep flying. Flock species need a leader. Lee Unji's voice came through. She was a few sectors away, dealing with something else. They're probably looking for their dominant bird. You need to convince them you're the new dominant. How do I do that? Make their sounds. Loudly. Confidently. Act like you own the space. Minho felt stupid, standing in the middle of a cargo bay making bird noises at the ceiling. But he was stuck in a space station with killer aliens. So stupid was relative. He started whistling, trying to mimic the calls he heard from above. The razorbirds stopped circling. They hung in the air, wings beating, heads tilted to listen. Minho whistled again, louder this time. He added a trill at the end. Something he remembered from watching parrots back on Earth. One bird landed on a cargo container near him, then another, then 5 more. Within minutes, the entire flock was perched around the bay, watching him with their heads tilted at identical angles. I have an audience, Minho said. Now what? Keep them interested, Jiwoo replied. Make the sounds they make. Show them you're part of the flock. They'll calm down once they think they're not alone. Across the sector, similar scenes played out. Jae-sung found the Morthian creeper hiding in a ventilation shaft and spent 40 minutes just sitting nearby. not moving, barely breathing. The creeper was an ambush predator that attacked anything that moved. So, Jae-sung didn't move. He became part of the environment, boring and safe. Eventually, the creeper crept out of hiding and curled up in a corner to sleep. Sang-woo dealt with a Thalian swimmer that had somehow gotten into the water recycling system. It was panicking, smashing against the walls of the pipes. He drained one section of the system and climbed in with scuba gear, then just swam alongside it, matching its movements, showing it that the water was safe and another creature was calm in it. After 20 minutes, the swimmer stopped panicking and followed him to a collection tank where it could be safely contained. On the bridge, Thelvan watched all of this on multiple screens. His command staff was silent, witnessing something none of them had ever seen before. The humans weren't using weapons or technology. They were using patience, observation, and something that looked almost like magic, but was actually thousands of years of evolutionary practice at understanding non-human minds. "Explain this to me," Thelvan said to Boram. "How are they doing this?" Boram thought for a moment. "My people have a long history with animals. We didn't just hunt them or farm them. We made them into partners. Dogs helped us hunt. Cats protected our food stores from pests. Horses let us travel. Birds warned us of danger. We survived as a species because we learned to see minds in other creatures and communicate with them. But these aren't Earth animals. They're completely alien. Doesn't matter. Fear looks the same across species. So does curiosity, aggression, playfulness. The expressions are different, but the emotions underneath are universal. My people learned to read those universal signals." Thelvan watched Ji-woo on the screen, walking calmly through a corridor with the render padding along beside her. "One of them," Boram said. "We're also pretty good at being stubborn and surviving impossible situations. But yeah, the animal thing is definitely in our top 5 talents." An hour and 40 minutes after they started, Ji-woo gathered reports from all the human teams. 15 of the 17 escaped creatures were calm and either contained or being peacefully herded into holding areas. 2 creatures remained loose. One was a Delvarian scuttler, a bug-like thing about 3 feet long that was more annoying than dangerous. It was hiding somewhere in the ductwork, but it would probably come out for food eventually. The other one was much more serious. The Dreadmaw had escaped from complete isolation containment and had somehow gotten into the residential section of the station. 800 civilians were sheltering behind locked doors, while a creature that was smarter than most sentient species prowled the corridors outside. "I'm out of time," Thelvan said over the comm. "High Command is watching. I can't delay anymore. Either you handle the Dreadmaw in the next 15 minutes, or I evacuate the residential section and vent it." Ji-woo looked at Hyun-sik. "Pull up everything we have on the Dreadmaw." He did, and they read through the file together. The Dreadmaw's homeworld had been discovered by accident when a survey ship landed, and the crew never reported back. Recovery teams found the ship intact and the crew missing. It took them 3 weeks to find what had happened. The Dreadmaw had been waiting, learning, hunting them one by one over months. It was patient, intelligent, and cruel. "This isn't like the others," Hyun-sik said quietly. "This one doesn't kill from fear. It kills because it enjoys it." Ji-woo stared at the file for a long moment. Then she stood up. "I'm going in alone." "No," several voices said at once over the comm. "It's too smart for group tactics. If I bring others, it'll see them as a hunting party. It'll attack. I need to seem like I'm not worth the effort." She didn't give anyone time to argue. She just walked toward the residential section, leaving even the render behind. The residential section was too quiet. Ji-woo walked through corridors that should have been full of people going about their lives. But now, every door was sealed, and every hallway empty. The only sound was the soft click-click-click of the Dreadmaw's echolocation, bouncing off walls somewhere ahead. She had studied this creature for months, fascinated by its intelligence. The Dreadmaw was solitary in the wild, the only apex predator on a world where most animals hunted in packs. It had evolved to be smarter than the pack hunters, to outwit groups through patience and planning. Its brain-to-body ratio was close to human levels. Maybe even higher. That was what made it so dangerous. You couldn't trick something that was nearly as smart as you were. Jiwoo checked her breathing, slowed her heart rate as much as she could, and started walking. She deliberately favored her left leg, creating a slight limp. She let her shoulders slump, made herself look tired and hurt. Not injured enough to be easy prey, which might trigger an immediate attack. Just worn down, old, not worth the energy to kill. The clicking sounds stopped. That meant the Dreadmaw had detected her and was listening. Jiwoo kept walking, maintaining the limp. She didn't look around, nervously. Nervous meant prey. She just walked like someone who was exhausted and lost, and not particularly concerned about it. A sick animal, maybe. Something that wasn't going to run, wasn't going to fight, wasn't interesting. She passed through 2 corridors. The hair on the back of her neck stood up. That old prey instinct that humans still carried. The sense that something was watching. She ignored it and kept walking. Behind her, she heard the softest sound of claws on metal. The Dreadmaw was following her, staying out of sight, evaluating. She didn't turn around. Turning around meant she knew it was there, which meant she was aware of the threat, which made her a potential challenge instead of a non-threat. Jiwoo led it slowly away from the residential quarters, toward an empty cargo staging area. Her leg was actually starting to hurt from maintaining the fake limp. Her back ached from the slouched posture, but she kept going, step by step, like she had all the time in the world and nowhere important to be. The cargo area was large and open, with containers stacked along the walls and plenty of floor space in the middle. Jiwoo walked to the center and stopped near a cargo container. For a moment, she just stood there, swaying slightly like she was dizzy. Then she sat down on the floor, slowly, awkwardly. She wrapped her arms around her knees and put her head down, the universal posture of exhaustion. The Dreadmaw emerged from the shadows. It was even bigger than Jiwoo remembered from seeing it in containment. 18 feet long from snout to tail, built low to the ground on 8 legs that moved in perfectly coordinated steps. Its head was wide and flat, with mandibles that could crush through ship hulls. Its eyes were intelligent, calculating. Those eyes studied her. Jiwoo didn't look up. She just sat there, head down, breathing slowly. She had committed completely to this performance. She was a sick animal that had wandered into the wrong territory. Not a threat, not interesting, not worth killing. The Dreadmaw circled her once, clicking softly, building a 3-dimensional map with sound, learning her exact position and posture. Jiwoo felt it pass behind her, close enough that its breath stirred her hair. Every muscle in her body wanted to tense, to run, to fight. She forced herself to stay relaxed. The creature completed its circle and stopped in front of her, about 10 feet away. It lowered its head and sniffed the air. It could probably smell her fear, despite her calm exterior. But fear mixed with exhaustion, with defeat. Not the sharp fear of prey about to run. Just the dull fear of something too tired to care anymore. Seconds crawled by. Jiwoo counted her own heartbeats and tried not to think about the fact that she was gambling her life on a theory about alien psychology. The Dreadmaw could kill her in half a second. One snap of those mandibles, and she would be gone. But she had read the files carefully. On its homeworld, the Dreadmaw was the only large predator. It never had to compete for food. It could afford to be selective. It could ignore sick prey that might be diseased or not worth the calories to digest. She was betting everything that those instincts still applied here. The Dreadmaw made a low rumbling sound. Not quite a growl, more like consideration. Then it turned and walked away, disappearing back into the corridors. Jiwoo stayed sitting for another full minute, not trusting her legs to hold her if she tried to stand. Her whole body was shaking with adrenaline. Finally, she managed to lift her head and key her comm with trembling fingers. "It's gone," she whispered. "Start evacuating the civilians. Slowly. Small groups. Tell them not to run. Not to make loud noises. The Dreadmaw will leave them alone if they don't act like prey." "Are you insane?" Thelvan's voice came through, sharp with anger and relief mixed together. "You could have been killed." "Yes," Jiwoo agreed. "But I wasn't. Now get those people out." Over the next 20 minutes, civilians evacuated in careful, quiet groups. Jiwoo stayed in the cargo area, maintaining her exhausted posture just in case the Dreadmaw came back to check. It didn't. It had decided she wasn't interesting and extended that assessment to the other slow-moving, quiet people it encountered. When the last civilian was clear, Jiwoo finally stood up. Her legs felt like rubber. She made her way back to the biology lab, where Hyun-sik and the others were waiting. "All creatures contained or accounted for," she reported. "Sector 7 is secure." Thelvan's voice came over the comm, addressing the entire station. "Lockdown lifted. Sector 7 is being cleared for re-entry. Medical teams to your stations. Everyone else, stand by for all clear confirmation." On the bridge, the command staff was already pulling together reports and damage assessments. 3 people had died before Jiwoo had calmed the render. 8 security personnel had died in the initial response, but 47 people who should have died in a sector vent were alive. 17 dangerous creatures were calm and secured, without being harmed, and everyone wanted to know how the humans had done it. Bo-Ram fielded questions from a dozen different species, all asking variations of the same thing. "How did you communicate with creatures that don't speak? How did you calm predators without weapons? How is this possible?" She tried to explain about domestication, about thousands of years of humans living alongside animals and learning their languages. She tried to describe the bond between humans and dogs, how ancient humans had looked at wolves and seen potential friends instead of threats. She tried to convey what it meant to be a species that extended its social circle beyond its own kind. Most of them didn't really understand. For them, there were sentient beings you negotiated with as equals, and non-sentient creatures you controlled with force or technology. The idea of a middle ground, of relationship and communication with beings that couldn't speak back, was alien to them, but they were impressed. And more importantly, they were interested. "We're receiving requests," Thelvan told Bo-Ram. "Colonies with dangerous wildlife want human consultants. Research stations want human staff. The military is asking if humans can train creatures for combat roles." Bo-Ram frowned. "We're not going to turn animals into weapons. That's not what this is about." "Then what is it about?" "Understanding, respect, seeing minds in places others don't look." She paused. "We're good with animals because we learned to care about creatures that weren't us. That's not a weapon. That's just being human." In the biology lab, Jiwoo sat with Hyun-sik and reviewed the data from the last few hours. Every human who had helped was exhausted, some of them shaking from adrenaline. All of them processing what they had just accomplished. "This changes things," Hyun-sik said quietly. "For your species. I mean, the galaxy is going to see humans differently now." "Is that good or bad?" Jiwoo asked. "I don't know yet. But they'll want more of this. More humans doing impossible things with animals. They'll want to use you." Jiwoo thought about the render. Now sedated again and back in its cell. She thought about the Dreadmaw, intelligent and patient and alone. She thought about all the other creatures the Coalition kept in cages for study. "Maybe that's not bad," she said. "If we can help, if we can bridge the gap between sentient species and the animals they don't understand, maybe that's worth doing. Even if it means your species becomes defined by it, the animal people, the ones who speak to beasts." "We've been called worse," Jiwoo said. She smiled, tired but genuine. "And honestly, I can think of worse things to be known for than caring about creatures that can't speak for themselves, her comm chimed. Priority message from Earth. The diplomatic corps wanted to speak with her. So did the Coalition High Command. And apparently, a dozen different news networks wanted interviews. Here we go, Jiwoo muttered. The next week passed in a blur of debriefings, interviews, and meetings. Jiwoo found herself explaining what she had done, over and over, to different groups of people and aliens. Some were fascinated, some were skeptical. Some seemed almost offended by the idea that humans had this ability. One Viridian counselor asked her directly, "Can you do this with sentient species? Can you tame us?" The room got very quiet after that question. Everyone was thinking it, but he was the first to say it out loud. Jiwoo chose her words carefully. There's a difference between communication and control. What we did with those creatures was about understanding them, reading their emotions, responding to their needs. We can't do that with sentient beings, because you already have language. You can tell us what you need. Those animals couldn't, so we had to learn to read them. But you see minds in them, the counselor pressed. You form bonds with them. You keep animals in your homes as companions. How do we know you don't see us the same way? Because you're sitting here asking me that question, Jiwoo replied. The render couldn't ask. The Dreadmaw couldn't negotiate. You can. That's the line. That's what makes you different. The counselor didn't look entirely satisfied, but he nodded and let the matter drop. Later, Jiwoo met with other humans who had helped during the crisis. They gathered in a small conference room and shared their experiences. The flagship of the Viridian Coalition floated in orbit above the Viridian homeworld, a massive ship that served as both military command and diplomatic center. Jiwoo had never been on anything this large before. The station where she worked was big, but this was a city in space, with thousands of crew and entire sections devoted to government functions. She sat in a conference room with windows that looked out at the planet below, swirls of purple and gold in its atmosphere. Around the table sat other humans who had helped during the crisis, along with Ambassador Shin Tae-yang, humanity's representative to the Coalition. Across from them sat the Coalition Security Council. 5 representatives from the founding species of the Coalition. They looked uncomfortable, which Jiwoo found oddly reassuring. At least they weren't completely in control of this conversation. The Viridian counselor, the same one from before, spoke first. We've reviewed all the footage from the station incident. We've read the reports, we've interviewed witnesses, and we still don't fully understand what your species did. Ambassador Shin nodded to Dr. Han Jisoo, a researcher from Earth who specialized in animal cognition and behavior. She stood and activated a holographic display showing images from human history. My species has a unique relationship with animals, Dr. Han began. It started about 30,000 years ago, when we domesticated wolves. Not by force, but through mutual benefit. Wolves helped us hunt. We shared our food with them. Over generations, we changed each other. Wolves became dogs. Humans became better at reading nonverbal communication and emotional signals. The display showed images of ancient humans with dogs, then shifted to show other animals. Horses, cats, cattle, chickens, birds of prey. We repeated this process with dozens of species. Each time, we learned more about communication beyond language. We learned to read body language, to understand fear and aggression and playfulness across species barriers. We learned that minds exist in many forms, not just in beings who can speak our language. A different counselor, this one from a species called the Thros, leaned forward. But how does this translate to alien creatures you've never encountered before? The animals on that station came from worlds humans have never visited. How did you know how to communicate with them? Dr. Han smiled. Because emotions are universal. Fear looks the same whether it's a human, a dog, or a Vraxian render. The expression might be different. The body language might vary. But the core emotion underneath is recognizable. We learned to read those universal signals through thousands of years of practice with our own animals. You're saying you can read emotions in non-sentient creatures, the Thros counselor said slowly. Yes. And sometimes in sentient ones, though that's not our focus. Dr. Han brought up another image, this one showing brain scans. Humans have unusually developed mirror neurons, parts of the brain that help us understand and mimic others. We also have strong pattern recognition abilities. Combined, these traits make us exceptional at cross-species empathy. The counselors exchanged looks. One of them, a crystalline being whose species Jiwoo didn't recognize, spoke in a voice that sounded like wind chimes. This ability concerns us. If you can read emotions and communicate with non-sentient creatures, what prevents you from manipulating sentient beings? There it was. The question everyone had been dancing around. Ambassador Shin stood. He was older than Jiwoo, maybe 60, with gray hair and a calm presence that came from years of diplomatic work. Nothing prevents us, except our own ethics. But the same could be said for any species with advanced psychology or neuroscience. Understanding how minds work doesn't mean we use that understanding to harm others. Understanding with Desis. Your species keeps animals as companions, the crystalline counselor pressed. You train them to obey commands. You control their breeding, their diet, their entire lives. How is that different from subjugation? Away. Away. Jiwoo spoke up before she could stop herself. Because they're not sentient. They can't understand concepts like freedom or self-determination. We provide for their needs, keep them safe, give them enrichment and care. It's not the same as controlling a being that can think and choose for themselves. But you draw that line yourself, the counselor said. You decide what counts as sentient. What if you're wrong? Not. Then we adjust, Jiwoo said. When we discovered that octopi on Earth were more intelligent than we initially thought, we changed how we treated them. When we learned that certain birds could use tools and solve complex problems, we reconsidered our relationship with them. We're not perfect, but we try to do better when we learn more. The meeting continued for hours, with the counselors probing every aspect of humanity's relationship with animals. They wanted protocols, guidelines, restrictions. They wanted assurances that humans wouldn't use these abilities inappropriately. Ambassador Shin negotiated carefully, offering some concessions while protecting humanity's core interests. Yes, humans working with alien animals would follow coalition guidelines. Yes, there would be oversight and review. But no, humans would not weaponize animals for military purposes. And no, humans would not use their empathic abilities to manipulate sentient beings. Finally, after nearly 6 hours, the meeting ended. The counselors left to deliberate. The humans stayed in the conference room, exhausted. That went well, Kang Minho said sarcastically. Actually, it did, Ambassador Shin replied. They're scared of us now, but they also need us. Half the coalition has planets with dangerous wildlife that they can't manage. Research stations across the galaxy have animals they can't handle without heavy sedation. They want what we can offer. Even if they don't trust us? Jiwoo asked. Trust takes time. But respect. We've earned that today. Shin looked at each of them. What you did on that station was extraordinary. You saved lives without violence. Resolved an impossible crisis through understanding instead of force. That's something special, and the galaxy is going to remember it. Over the next week, the Council made their decision. Humans would be offered positions across Coalition space as animal behavior specialists, wildlife consultants, and xenofauna experts. Research grants would be provided to study human empathic abilities. New protocols would be developed for handling dangerous creatures based on human methods. It was everything Ambassador Shin had hoped for. Humanity's role in the coalition was expanding, their value recognized, but there was a cost. Jiwoo saw it in the way other species looked at her now. There was respect, yes, but also wariness. Some saw humans as useful. Some saw them as strange. And some saw them as vaguely threatening, these beings who could speak to animals and read emotions across species barriers. On her last day before returning to the station, Ji-woo took a shuttle down to the Viridian homeworld and visited one of their natural preserves. Commander Thel Van had arranged it. A gesture of goodwill. She walked through alien forests with purple vegetation and bioluminescent fungi, watching creatures that had evolved on a completely different world. Some were herbivores, gentle and slow. Others were predators, quick and dangerous. All of them were fascinating. Thel Van walked beside her. "I've been thinking about what you said. About responsibility. For what we tame." "And?" Ji-woo asked. "I don't think my people understand that concept. We see animals as resources or threats. The idea of being responsible for them beyond basic welfare is foreign to us." "Maybe that's something we can teach," Ji-woo said. "Not just how to calm dangerous animals, but why it matters to try." They stopped at a viewing platform overlooking a valley, where a herd of large, six-legged creatures grazed peacefully. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of violet and orange. "Your species is going to change the coalition," Thel Van said quietly. "Maybe not in ways we can see yet, but it's coming. You've shown us that there are other ways to solve problems besides force or technology. That understanding can be stronger than weapons." "We're not perfect," Ji-woo reminded him. "We make mistakes. We've done terrible things to animals in our own history. Factory farming, habitat destruction, extinction. We're still learning. But you care about learning. You care about doing better." Thel Van looked at her. "That might be your species' real gift. Not just that you can speak to animals, but that you think it's important to try." Ji-woo returned to the station the next day. Life slowly returned to normal. Or as normal as things could be after what had happened. The render was still in its cell, still sedated most of the time. But now, when Ji-woo visited, the handlers let her interact with it while it was awake, supervised, and careful. She would sit outside its cell and make the soft clicking sounds. The render would come to the transparent barrier and settle down, its massive head lowering to her level. They would stay like that for hours sometimes, just being calm together. Other humans had started working at the station too, brought in specifically for their animal expertise. The research protocols changed. More emphasis on understanding, less on control. Better enclosures, more enrichment. Careful attention to stress indicators. It wasn't perfect, but it was better. One day, Ji-woo received a message from Earth. It was from the animal sanctuary where she had trained before coming to space. The place that had taught her to see minds in creatures that couldn't speak. They had heard about what happened. They weren't surprised, they said. She had always had the gift. That ability to read animals and respond to their needs. They were proud of her, and they wanted her to know that back on Earth, enrollment in animal behavior programs had tripled. Young people were watching what happened on the station and deciding they wanted to learn those skills too. Ji-woo sat in her quarters and stared at that message for a long time. She thought about the render, about the dreadmaw, about all the other creatures that were trapped in cages because the coalition didn't know how else to study them. She thought about humanity's role in the galaxy, how they were becoming known as the animal people, the empaths, the weird ones who saw minds everywhere and thought that mattered. Maybe it was limiting. Maybe it put humans in a box, defined them by one trait, or maybe it was exactly what the galaxy needed. She pulled up a photo on her datapad, the one that had gone viral across coalition networks. It showed her sitting in that corridor during the crisis, the render lying beside her with its head in her lap. Both of them calm, despite the chaos around them. Someone had added a caption, "Humanity's superpower." Ji-woo smiled. It wasn't really a superpower. It was just empathy, pattern recognition, and thousands of years of practice at seeing minds in unexpected places. It was the ability to look at something frightened and hurt and say, "I understand, "You're safe now." It was the willingness to whisper, "easy," to monsters and mean it. She saved the photo and began writing her next report. There was so much work to do. So many creatures to understand. So many ways to make things better. The galaxy was full of animals that no one had tried to really communicate with yet, full of minds waiting to be recognized and respected. And humanity was just getting started. Outside her window, the stars glimmered. Each one had worlds orbiting it, and each world had its own creatures, with their own needs and fears and ways of being. Somewhere out there, someone was probably looking at a dangerous animal and thinking the only solution was force or cages or elimination. Maybe someday, they'd think to call a human instead. Someone who would sit down with that creature and try to understand it. Someone who would look at something alien and frightening and ask, "What are you afraid of? What do you need?" Someone who knew that the strongest bonds weren't built with chains or commands, but with patience and respect, and the simple recognition that minds come in countless forms. Jiwoo turned back to her work, typing steadily. She had a lot to say about the render's behavior patterns, about ways to improve its enclosure, about the possibility of eventually rehabilitating it enough to return to a protected habitat on its homeworld. Behind her words was a simple truth that humanity had learned long ago. Sitting by fires in the darkness with wolves who were not yet dogs, looking into alien eyes and seeing not a threat, but a potential friend. The truth that you could take almost anything frightening and dangerous, approach it with understanding instead of fear. And sometimes, if you were patient enough and brave enough, and willing to really listen, it would look back at you with recognition. And in that moment of connection across species, across evolution, across every difference that should have made communication impossible, something extraordinary would happen. Trust would begin, and the universe would get a little bit smaller, a little bit more connected, a little bit more like home.